All right. Pick it up right where you left off, Don, if you don't mind.
Well, you had asked me why Karl Rove would be interested in Alabama, and I gave you some background that most people don't, would not have any idea that Karl Rove, this omnipresent figure on Fox News, actually lives on the Gulf Coast, is married to someone from Alabama, has run many campaigns in the state of Alabama, and that we did battle here. Karl Rove saw me as an obstacle to his taking over the state and to take over the governorships of most states. I mean, his objective was was a 50-state strategy to have a Republican majority in all states. As the Republican Attorney General of Arizona said, he couldn't beat me fair and square, so they targeted me with this prosecution. But what I wanted to jump onto now is the testimony of a Republican lawyer, a woman who was hired, she says, by Karl Rove and the husband of my prosecutor to do an investigative background research on me to try to find she told 60 Minutes that she was, CBS's 60 Minutes, that she was hired by these people, Rove and the husband of my prosecutor, to dig up dirt on Don Siegelman. She came forward, and I had never seen this woman until sometime after I'd gotten out of prison. But she came forward and gave sworn testimony, Mike, to the House Judiciary Committee that Karl Rove was behind my prosecution.
Right.
She also said that she was personally on a telephone conversation where the husband of my prosecutor said that, and who was also managing my opponent's campaign, was telling the son and some other campaign workers of my Republican opponent that they didn't need to worry about me anymore because his wife, who was the U.S. attorney, was going to take care of me. And she went on to describe other things, nefarious conversations, where I was described as a cockroach, to a person that wouldn't die politically, and that they needed to do something to put me to a political death once and for all. And the husband of my prosecutor purportedly said, according to the sworn testimony of this Republican lawyer, that they didn't need to worry about me anymore, that he had talked to Karl, and Karl had talked to the Department of Justice, and they were already on my case.
They absolutely wanted to destroy you. And you know, I've had your daughter on the program before about a year ago. So the background to this is just horrifying. I mean, to think that this kind of activity, political activity, that makes you the only thing missing here that would make it right out of a totalitarian state playbook is somebody with a gun and a silencer on it.
Well, how about this? How about a country that also reduces our civil liberties so that we can be wiretapped without a warrant, so that we can interrogate people through torture, so that we can present false evidence to go into a war when there's no justification for it? How about a country that also condones elections that are stolen? Now, I'm not going to talk about the Florida election. I want to talk about my re-election campaign in 2002.
Right.
Most people, Mike, would not believe that the United States of America, their country, could possibly do these kinds of things. They would not, they don't want to believe.
That's right.
That in their United States of America that elections are stolen. But in my case, in 2002, the night of the election, I was declared the winner not only by the election officials of Alabama, but by CBS, ABC, NBC, probably Fox News too. I don't remember. Later that night, after midnight, after the lights had gone out in the courthouse, Southern Alabama County Courthouse,
right,
an all-Republican county, the lights came on in the basement of the sheriff's office, and there was a private recount of the votes. Votes were shifted electronically from my opponent, 5,000 votes from him from me to him, and the next day he was declared the winner by this all-Republican election commission in this South Alabama county. But interestingly, the two people who either claimed credit or who were given credit for stealing that election and swinging the votes to my Republican opponent, whose campaign manager was my prosecutor's husband,
right,
the close friend of Karl Rove. The two people who got credit or claimed credit was Karl Rove's partner, and also a man who later, immediately thereafter, after the election, went to work for a Jack Abramoff and Tom DeLay related lobbying company called the Alexandria Group. There are just so many Karl Rove fingerprints.
You know, I've got to ask, did you, and a dumb question, Don, but I have to ask it anyway, because this is almost Kafkaesque. Did you ever think, when you entered politics or just got on with your life, that anything like this could happen to you?
No, absolutely not. I guess I lived a life of trying to improve our system. As a young man, I was opposed to the war in Vietnam. I worked in some anti-war activities to try to bring the country back to its senses. When I was Secretary of State, I was the first statewide elected official in the United States to endorse an extension of the Voting Rights Act, as Ronald Reagan was opposing it. I did everything I could throughout my career to try to make the system work. And, you know, the one thing that shocked me, I guess, is after the conviction, I said a quiet prayer to myself, because I had been Attorney General, where I, Mike, had set execution dates for people who had been convicted of capital murder. And as governor, I had held clemency hearings, listening to the pleas of family members for their loved ones who were about to be executed. And I asked God to forgive me if I had made a mistake, because I realized then that the system is flawed, and that prosecutors, rogue prosecutors, not Rove prosecutors, but rogue prosecutors,
right,
could set somebody up and could make the system work to convict somebody who had not committed a crime. And there are some flaws. There's some things that happened in my case that I'm sure has happened many times throughout the United States in other trials. The only evidence that was presented against me was evidence that the prosecution knew was false at the time they elicited the testimony from a convicted felon whom they had worked out a plea bargain agreement with, a man who had admitted to taking $350,000 in bribes, was facing 40 years in prison. They recommended no prison time for this guy in exchange for his testimony that, again, was the only testimony that was given that caused my conviction. The interesting thing was it took the government over 70 interviews. They interviewed this felon over 70 times before he got his answers straight the way they wanted them, before they put him on the stand.
Oh my God!
That was admitted by the lawyer for this guy, and it's something that we hope will be investigated by the Department of Justice.
What has stopped you? And I've just got to ask this because I know my limits. What has stopped you from hunting down a couple of these people and just beating the living hell out of them?